Director at Regional Center of the East Bay, and I'm glad to talk with you this afternoon. It's been about 3 weeks since we had our last meeting, and there's been some changes in some of the directives we have, so I want to share that with you and just give you updates and answer any questions that you might have, or if I can't, to get back with you on answers when that's possible. So I'm going to start with sharing my screen and doing that so I can share the PowerPoint and not forget to give you any information that I think might be helpful to you. So most of my updates today are just going to be on what's been going on with COVID-19 and the newest directive that we've received from the Department of Developmental Services on alternative service delivery. Like I do every time we get together, I like to share the reports of COVID cases. And we have the number of COVID cases across the developmental disability service system. And for Regional Center of the East Bay, as of today, we've had 95 reported positive COVID cases in our population. And we remain at 3 people who've passed away as a result of COVID. 2 of those people lived in nursing facilities, larger congregate settings. Our case rate for COVID compared to other regional centers is fairly low. However, what that's due to, we don't know at this point, but we have had a lot of people practicing really safe practices and social distancing. So I think our behaviors have contributed to that. Our restrictions in our counties remain the same. The state changed to a new way of categorizing counties, and it looks like our case rates are really stabilized and coming down. Alameda County is close to moving from the top most restrictive zone down to the red zone, which would allow for some more reopenings and ability to provide different, more direct contact between people. At the same time, we are also experiencing the wildfires, the poor air quality, as well as the potential for power outages. We have been very lucky right now that we have not had significant wildfire events in our area, but we've all been impacted by the smoke from other areas. And in terms of preparation for wildfires and power outages, we really all need to be prepared to evacuate and have plans for what happens if there are longer term outages, which includes preparing for alternative places to go and having important documents and critical medications and supplies ready. One thing I do want to let people know about is Everbridge. RCEB has access to this system, which allows us to identify where there's been a disaster and make contact by phone, email, and I think text to people's whose information we have. We have all of our care homes and other programs in the database. We have all of our consumers. and we have all of our staff. And in the event that we had a major disaster, a fire that impacted a community, we would use the system to connect with people and make sure that people were okay. The general messages that would be sent out would be a question such as, do you need any assistance? And if and reply yes or no. And if someone replied yes, we would start efforts to connect with that person so that we could provide assistance and connection to services that might be available. So just like to let you know about that. We haven't used it very much, but some of our partner regional centers in other areas that have had more significant issues have. So the last time we spoke, we talked about the alternative delivery of non-residential services and the new model that was starting September 1st. And that prior to that, the Department of Developmental Services had had a number of different waivers and authorizations for payments and allowing for remote service delivery. And you can look at this slide that just goes through the fact that between March and August, the Department of Developmental Services has allowed us to pay non-residential service providers. And that's basically anyone who doesn't provide living arrangements for folks. And we've been allowed to pay even if someone has been not receiving any services. Starting September 2020, we are no longer allowed to pay if someone is not receiving any services. There is now a model of alternative service delivery, and in order to be paid, non-residential service providers have to provide a service, and it has to be something that is agreed to by the person receiving services. And I think I've spoken about this before, but the system of developmental disability services in California is quite reliant on federal funding. And we were allowed to receive federal funding for absence billing for about 3 months of services, and that ended. So California really needs to be able to bill for services to the federal government and receive those funds in order to sustain our system. So the idea of something alternative than just paying for absences needed to be developed. And so alternative service delivery allows for services to be provided flexibly and aligned with consumer preferences and their IPPs. And it allows consumers to guide service providers as to what their needs are and what they would prefer. And a lot of it is really built on the innovative service delivery approaches that have already been taken during the pandemic. And it establishes a mechanism for providers to provide these alternative services, receive payment, and preserve their workforce, and allows people to get some services, maybe not what they were getting before, but at least some services that are meaningful to them. And this is all related to the governor's executive order. And if you're interested, if you go to the Department of Developmental Services website and look under COVID-19 coronavirus information, all of the directives that have been issued are there. And this is the link here, and we'll be posting this on our website. So you'll be able to review that. But the directive lays out for non-residential service providers how they can deliver services during this time. And the directive lays out this list of different alternative services that can be provided, including support to minimize the impact of COVID, which may be the delivering of PPE and other supplies, providing information and training on using of protective equipment. It can include services delivered by telephone, video, and other electronic means. It can be providing self-guided training and educational material. It can be providing skills training to people who support the consumer and other transition supports for people. The one thing about any in-person type of services that are provided, which it can include, is they have to comply with the most restrictive state and local guidelines in effect. And what I can tell you about our counties is that providing services in the outdoors, providing supports where people are wearing personal protective equipment, where they're not interacting with multiple people and different people from day to day, where they're wearing face coverings and are 6 feet apart. Those are things that are in following the guidance of our local health departments. From an individual's perspective, I think what's important is that individual really drives what is delivered during this period of time. And so there needs to be discussion between individuals and their providers, and services need to be tailored to fit the individual. If you're electing alternative services, as an individual, you need to work with the service provider and the regional center to agree on what will be provided and what supports are needed and what needs to be adapted. If there isn't an agreement, there is a possibility of looking for new services and looking for new providers at this time. From a provider view, providers are going to have to certify to the regional center what alternative services they can provide. And providers are going to, for alternative services, have a monthly rate. And so depending on what they provide, that they will get paid the monthly rate for the individuals who are participating in alternative services. They will need to report what they're delivering, whether they're delivering services in person 1 day a week to the person, and maybe 2 days a week of Zoom classes and some other activities are delivered to the home, exactly what is being provided. And they're going to have to follow a number of accountability measures, including documentation, following plans, those sorts of things. And traditional services may still be provided. And this we're going to see a lot when it's really fairly simple to provide the same type of service via a remote method during the pandemic. And I'll give you an example. For our young children, if they're receiving speech therapy, if a speech therapist would have typically delivered an hour of speech therapy a week to an individual, then, and the speech therapist now is delivering that 1 hour a week via Zoom, they would bill per hour in that traditional way. Similarly, if a day service provides Zoom classes during a same schedule as a day program day, and people are attending those classes, they also may be billing via a traditional method of billing, and they won't be providing alternative services. In September, if you are a person served or their family member, the non-residential service providers should be reaching out to both the individual and whoever works with the individual, so their family members, care providers, and so forth, to find out what alternative services they're interested in receiving. The service providers will also be completing a certificate of alternative services that they will deliver, and they're required to tell the regional center what those are by October 5th. If an individual works with their provider and decides they want to receive alternative services, the service provider needs to tell the regional center case manager by the end of September that that individual wants to receive alternative services. The whole plan doesn't have to be developed, but they need to tell the regional center. The regional center will send a letter to the individual in their primary language that confirms that we have heard that they want to receive alternative services. And at the same time as doing all of this, the service provider should also be delivering services in an alternative method throughout the month. If they're going to deliver traditional services, they don't need to do any of this. In October, service providers delivering alternative services should be finalizing individual service plans for each consumers. During this month, as well as September, the providers will be reimbursed using existing rates and prior average attendance. However, if a consumer is not receiving any services during these months, the provider cannot bill. So if during the course of the earlier months of the pandemic, the consumer never received any services from the service provider, they were able to bill through retainer payment billing and absence billing. Now they are not allowed to bill anymore. The providers will have to report verification of what they've done by November 5th for September and October, and then every month after that, by the 5th of the month, they need to provide really documentation of engagement. And we are still waiting for the Department of Developmental Services to issue the reporting tool. We expect that to come sometime in the next couple of weeks so that people can start utilizing them. There's been a lot of questions about accountability for providers who are providing alternative services to make sure that individuals are getting the services that are important to them. And so the requirement for an individual service plan is definitely going to be there. There's going to be a requirement from the service providers that they are continuing to retain and pay staff, that they are going to really have to get notification. We as regional centers will have to notify people that we've been told that they will be getting alternative services and confirm that that's what they want. We expect that there will be a minimal amount of service that a provider will have to provide in order to bill for a monthly payment. And we're hoping that there's a collaborative approach when we are working together so that the ability of a family member to work with the consumer on the alternative service is considered, that the ability of a residential service provider to work with the consumer is considered as these options are developed. And there will be monthly reporting. So just a little graphic that I think might help, and you can find some more of this on our website. If the services are the same as what was provided before COVID, for instance, if you have a respite worker and they continue to come to the home and provide services wearing PPE, there's no change to the model. If the services are the same, like that speech therapy example, just provided remotely, then there's no change to the model. It's when there are alternative services that are really quite different from what is traditionally provided. For people who may join a Zoom class one day a week and at other times may participate in some activities that are dropped off, may have one day a week where someone from a day service comes and takes them out on a walk. That would be an alternative service delivery model. And so we expect that in the next few weeks, and I'm sorry I keep saying in the next few weeks, we are a little bit reliant on DDS to get some of these things finalized. We do expect there's going to be a family member and self-advocate engagement guide that we will be able to share with you, as well as some frequently asked questions. And these are going to be rolled out statewide because there is interest in consistency across the state. Although, as we all know, each county, each local area is quite different in terms of the resources that we have, in terms of the stage of the pandemic we're in. So these will be more general information, but we will share them as soon as possible, and they will be on our website. And we have also been promised these things for technical assistance. Stakeholder feedback on all of these proposals has guided a number of things that are going to be developed. So the idea of consistency statewide has been raised when these plans have been presented. Focused trainings for family members and consumers in more than just English have been asked for. And there have been a lot of questions on how to support individuals with highly intensive support needs and what kind of alternative services would support those individuals. And maybe those individuals are part of a smaller group that does need to have more traditional services. And there is still a real push and an interest in participant-directed services, which we've talked about before. So I want to make sure you go back and look at some information on that. And so the models that are being looked at now, the ways we're doing things now, the thinking about alternative service delivery, people doing some activities that aren't in person, that might be remote, that might be via Zoom. Some of these experiences may be evaluated to determine if those are things that we may continue after the pandemic. Whether or not it is for some people more satisfying to have a couple of days a week of in-person activities and a couple of days of Zoom activities. What is the preference of people? Do people want what they had before the pandemic, or are some of these things that will be preserved in the future? And so ongoing stakeholder engagement will inform the next phase of these changes. So I'm going to end with that. I'm going to stop my share. And I welcome any questions that people might have today, any concerns, and I'll do that right now. So let me do that. And I see someone already has a raised hand, and I'll start with that person. Let me make sure that person has a raised hand. Terry, is that someone who wants to ask a question? Terry?
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi pregunta es, ¿cuál es el tiempo mínimo que tienen para dar la terapia por día? Lo que pasa que a mi hija hay veces que le dan tal vez 40 minutos, 45 minutos. No sé si es el tiempo mínimo o el máximo. Yo sé que es una hora de terapia, pero es mi pregunta.
Lisa, she wants to know what is the minimum of therapy because her son is receiving half hour. Señora, ¿dijo media hora?
A veces es 40 minutos, 45, pero no
You only
se
received 40
completa casi la hora. La
or 45 minutes, but not the hours. So she wants to know what is the minimum therapist. ¿Qué tipo de terapia, señora?
habla.
Oh, okay.
Is this for a
Sí,
child
también
under 3?
mi otra niña tiene terapia física y de desarrollo, pero a veces es el tiempo que les dan. Muy rara vez le dan la hora completa.
She's saying that they never provide the entire hour. So she wants to know.
Yeah. You know, I think that's something for you to talk to the therapist about. Sometimes when therapists provide therapy, there is 45 minutes and then the person receiving the therapy isn't really able to engage much longer. So a lot of that is an individual kind of assessment from the therapy provider. You can do that in, yeah.
Oh, you want me to ask? Oh, I don't know if.
No, I mean, it really, well, if you could just share that a lot of times that is based on the child's ability to participate. And
Okay, muchas
yeah.
veces es de la edad del niño, la habilidad que tenga de participar. And then, Lisa, can you continue, please? Sí, señora, todo depende de la edad del niño, si ellos ven que tiene la habilidad para participar o creen que es mucho. Pero dice que lo hable con su terapista, eso tiene que hablarlo con la terapista para ver por qué está pasando esto.
Ok, gracias. Y
Yeah.
una pregunta más, no vi la plática desde el principio. Me gustaría saber si ya tienen fecha para empezar a dar las pláticas en persona.
En persona, oh, okay. I'm sorry, she said that she missed the first part and she wants to know when we're gonna start providing these meetings in person.
So meetings for people in person is going to probably be a little while longer, especially for direct therapies where a therapist is seeing multiple people in a day. Although there are some clinics that are starting to provide some in-person service. So it depends on the county guidelines. It depends on how safe people can be kept. I have another question is, what if day program is only providing Zoom programming and the client is not participating? So if someone is not able to benefit from the programming via Zoom, I think this is the time, this month is the time to talk with the program about what services they can deliver that will be valuable to the consumer. If those services are not valuable to the consumer, then that is the time to meet with your case manager and that provider and talk about what the other options are. It may be that there are other programs that are more of benefit to individuals than what can be provided by Zoom, and I think that question has been raised. If those services aren't the right services and that is all the provider provides, then you will be able to choose another provider and identify what else there might be. We also have participant-directed services, and sometimes that involves a family member identifying someone that they are comfortable with providing services, and there are new vendorizations where we can vendor someone for personal attendant or something like that who could provide additional support. And there is a question if those supports are going to be are going to end by October 31st. And most of the directives that we are seeing issued by the Department of developmental services are being issued in 30-day increments just because of the nature of those extensions. And we don't expect a whole lot of changes in those directives until there is really a broader opening up of our counties. So we expect to see those services continue, and we expect, you know, that people can choose to participate in those as we move forward. And if a day program client would love to attend Zoom classes, but they need assistance in order to attend the classes. So I don't know what kind of assistance that is, but there are several things that we are looking at. We have heard about family members who are at home with their family member. However, they are working from home, and for them to assist with someone participating in Zoom classes isn't going to work. Or they may be unable to help with that. Those are places where we can think about personal assistance being available if there's a need for someone to also support that participation in the home. In a number of our residential care homes, we are providing additional assistance during the day. So if there are Zoom classes that people need to participate in, there is staffing available to do that. It is not always possible for one-to-one support in some of those settings, but definitely we can think about additional supports for people to be able to participate. And the Zoom activities should be tailored for the individual. So if there are Zoom classes that aren't engaging to the individual, or they need assistance with actually logging on and getting on, those are things that we could see a program actually providing, maybe to help a caregiver or the personal attendant learn those things and then help the person to get on. I don't know if that helps. If you want me to unmute you and you want to ask something else, feel free to raise your hand. Yeah. Are there any other questions? We don't have very many questions in the chat. Wondering if there are any other questions or concerns from people about what's going on right now. If I knew how to run polls, I'd like to know for anyone who's a family member or and a participant in day services or non-residential services, I'd like to hear if people have been contacted by their programs. Would that, the question about what I mentioned before, would that come under the daycare umbrella? It might if the family member was working, but it might if it wasn't possible for the family member to really assist with the programming. It might come under an exception for personal attendance. So we would look at those things on an individual basis. I think the other thing, someone says they don't see any changes in programs. Every single program that is non-residential, if they are not going to be providing traditional services or providing the service the same as they were before, except remotely, are required to reach out by September 30th to have a conversation with the participants so that they know what is going to be happening and can agree on services that they want. If you find that you haven't been reached out to, please contact your case manager. And if the provider is providing Zoom programming and the person you're supporting, if it's yourself, aren't able to participate in that fully, please reach out so that you can find out what else they can provide if that's not being successful for you at that time. As a regional center, we will be getting information from the programs that they have reached out to people and sending a letter confirming. And there will be double checks on this because providers this month have to be providing a service in order to bill for non-residential services. Okay, I have another question. How much of this information has been given to the case managers? It seems like I get inconsistent feedback responses from various case managers. So last Tuesday, we had basically a full day of different trainings with case managers on all of the changes involving directives and especially involving alternative service delivery. So case managers have been receiving information. The reason we're doing these meetings, the reason we've been doing remote meetings with case managers is there's a lot to learn and it's a lot of new information. So if you feel like you haven't gotten the right information from the case manager, if you want to share with me what you think more education is needed on, we want them to be trained about this. We still don't have all the information from the Department of Developmental Services on the specific details, and we will continue to give case managers as much training as we are able to. If there's some area that you feel like case managers weren't particularly aware of, we did recognize that participant-directed services were a new area for people to get information on, and we did provide additional training on that last week, and we continue to do that. If someone is feeling like the case manager isn't providing the appropriate support, that would be the time to, ask the case manager for what the support is that you feel like you're not receiving. And if that's not effective, then speaking with the supervisor. If there is something that we are not able to provide, then you can certainly ask for a denial letter. We do issue notices of action when we're not able to provide services, and we have due process for those things. But I'd certainly like to know when people don't feel supportive so we can think about ways that we can make that better and improve that. Someone said their Brothers Day program started providing services for 1 hour on every Tuesday and Thursday after they waited for 6 months. Yeah, I think that there were a few, not many programs that were not providing Zoom activities when people were really interested in those services. And certainly if your brother is interested in more than that, that is something that should be a conversation with the provider during this month, because for some people that would be fine, but for others they would want a whole lot more than that as what they want to participate in. So I think those are where we have to have conversations, because there is some thought about basically what are the minimums of services that people can receive. And one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of people about is what kind of things can people do outdoors? What kind of things can people do in small groups that isn't Zoom, that gets people out in the fresh air when it's fresh and do those activities. And we're going to be asking more and more of those questions, especially as we see alternative service logs. And I think this is another place where if that program isn't providing what is important to your brother, people can make choices to look at other services as well that may fit better. Okay, let's see. Yeah. Yes, 2 hours a week is not equal to day program from 9 to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. Totally agree. Now, there is a question of lack of oversight of service providers. So service providers have a variety of different types of oversight. During this new iteration of alternative service delivery, there weren't requirements between March and now in terms of what service providers had to deliver. The authority to pay for absences was in the regulations that if there's a state of emergency, service providers can bill for absences. And service providers were told that they needed to retain staff and they should be reaching out and connecting with people. With alternative service delivery now, they are required to provide services, and there are more requirements in terms of really having plans and following plans and developing ISPs. And so if the ISP isn't being followed, then that is something you can work with your case manager on following up on. And my experience is that many service providers are really trying to do a great job and to deliver services, but when you don't feel like that's happening, we will do what we can to support. I agree, there's a comment here that many consumers can't participate in Zoom-based activities. And that is part of what we have to figure out right now. What is it that would be important for them to participate in? And if someone can participate in exercise outdoors, that sort of thing, I actually think we should be looking at whether there's another model for them right now if the Zoom activities aren't the right thing. Are there models that we should be looking at? And I'd appreciate any feedback on that. I think your service provider should be hearing about feedback on that. Our direct service professionals who work in residential care, who work in supported living, providing services, are working directly with consumers. And I think that there are options for staff to work directly with maybe one client 3 hours a day and another client 3 hours a day, and then also be able to provide some services. It may not be the same services as were provided before the pandemic, but it might meet some of these needs. So I want to share those thoughts with me. Providing services at a site is hard because at a site, you can't have the social distance that is required. There are lots of issues with transportation, but there are ways to be more creative. And that is what we are encouraging as we move forward. And certainly best practices has their name in there. I'd certainly like to talk to you and really know what you're thinking about, because we'd like to do that. Adult day programs, there are very few adult day programs. There are, and development of adult day services has been very slow. We are always working with providers and want them to expand, but there have been issues involving rates over the last, I don't know, 12 years that have impacted the ability to expand and grow as programs. Will there be a universal service plan document? Yes, there is a document that really the service providers working with the regional center have come up with, and we will post that document on our website so you can take a look at it. It meets all the requirements that DDS has for service providers, and so we will share that. It's one example of a document, and it's something that can be used. Some providers may have something different, but it does meet the requirement. So let's see. Cindy is asking a question that I don't understand. So Cindy, if you want to unmute and let me know what you were asking, because I'm not exactly sure what you mean by an alternative service for training provided to vendor staff. Is that a community question, or is that a service provider question?
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
It's the alternative service. I think this is slide.
So, and if a service provider needs to train their staff on, say, the use of personal protective equipment, are the safe practices for providing services outdoors in a socially distant way, you could see that being part of a plan that maybe one day a week they provide an hour or two of that training to their staff during the course of a day, and that would count as some sort of alternative service delivery. That would not be acceptable as the only thing that they did during the course of a month. So, yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I think that we are really interested in hearing about what types of things people are looking for that they think would be better alternatives for people during this time. And, you know, maybe thinking through some other things that would be helpful. And one of the things is that for some people, what is available may not meet the need, which is why there are some other options, like the participant-directed service. If families are working, like increased hours of one-to-one personal attendant, where someone can really have a personalized plan for their services. So those are the kind of things we are looking at as we move forward. It probably will be the spring before we have a large number of programs who are providing direct service. And I think for those who are providing direct services, if you look at things like what schools are thinking about, if they go back, it will be more like people go a couple of days a week rather than 5 days a week as an opportunity to allow people to get some benefit. And group employment back in place. Some of our employment providers have been and are continuing to offer group employment. If the employer is continuing to want to employ the folks, and then that's something that should be talked about at a meeting this month. We have several groups that have started up. We have many individuals who actually, the jobs they've had in supported employment have continued through the pandemic, and they've been considered essential workers. But group employment in 1 to 3 is probably very possible right now if that site where people have been employed is reopened. So that is definitely a possibility at this time. Okay, are there any other questions from the group? I appreciate your questions, and if there's something that would be helpful to you on one of these meetings, if you'd like to hear from a couple of service providers who might describe things that they are doing, we could invite some service providers to come. I also want to let you know at 6 p.m. on October 7th, we will be having a meeting about the results of our performance contract from last year, which everyone is invited to participate in. We're required to do that. And on another date in October, we will be planning for our performance contract objectives for 2021. And that would be a great time for some of you to share feedback, to give suggestions, ideas of what areas that the regional center should focus on in terms of performance in the next year. So we welcome your feedback in that, that way as well. So if there aren't any other questions, thank you for participating. Thank you for your feedback. And I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks. Bye-bye.